Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Nigel Floyd. I'm a freelance film critic here in London. On behalf of Momentum Pictures and the Clapham Picture House, it's my pleasure to welcome you here tonight. It's also my pleasure to welcome the patrons of roughly 60 cinemas around the UK this evening, and one in the Republic of Ireland, in Dublin as well. And also there is a feed going out to New York and LA, so you're all going to be on screen. This is your 15 minutes of fame. Without further ado, I'll just explain how the evening is going to run. I'm going to start the evening off by asking a few questions just to give a little bit of the background to the project and how it came to be, and open up a bit of a discussion. Once I've asked each of the guests probably one question, maybe one and a bit, we'll see how much time we've got. We've got roughly 30 or 40 minutes, and at the end of that time there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions. Now, we're aware of the fact that people sitting in the other cinemas are just going to be seeing a screen while we're messing about with the microphones. So there are going to be two ushers, one in each aisle, and they're going to have the radio mic. So if you're interested in asking a question, please keep your hand up, and I'll try to keep the microphones moving by going, okay, we're going to go here and then there, and then we're going to go there and then there. And that way there'll be less of a time lag and there'll be a bit more of a flow. That at least is the theory. Without further ado, please welcome Colin Firth. Got your name?
Not my name.
And Helena Bonham Carter. We have an embarrassment of riches for you this evening. As a special extra this evening, we have Claire Bloom, who plays Queen Mary in the film. And the director of tonight's film, Tom Hooper. Now, these guys have been traipsing around the world doing this for quite some time, so they're going to be quite well oiled. I don't mean in the sense of well lubricated, I mean well oiled in their answers.
That's that too.
I hope.
That is. It's not apple juice.
So, Tom, I'm going to start with you for two reasons. One of which is that you said that this is your most personal project. People will have seen, of course, Damned United. I hope that you've seen also John Adams, which for me is one of the great pieces of TV of the last 20 years. And you have sort of a very personal connection to this, in that the way that the film was discovered was that your mother stumbled upon it on your behalf. And also there is a sort of slight personal connection in the sense that your mother is Australian and your father is English, and there's something of the same dynamic between them as we find in the film itself. Perhaps you could combine those two into one long and very articulate answer.
Well, the only reason I came upon this material is because I happen to be half Australian, half English, and living in London. My Australian mother was invited late 2007 by some Australian friends to make up a token Aussie audience in a tiny fringe theatre play reading of an unproduced, unrehearsed play called The King's Speech. Now, she's never been invited to a play reading in her entire life. She almost didn't go because it didn't exactly sound very promising. But thank God she did, because she came home, rang me up and said, "You're not going to believe this, but I think I have found your next film." And the moral of the story is, listen to your mother.
Absolutely.
But the reason the material really spoke to me was not because I have any connection whatsoever to the royal subject matter, but because as the son of an English father and Australian mother, one of the narratives of my childhood was my mother unpacking the effects of my own father's childhood. My father lost his dad in the war at the age of 2. My grandfather was a bomber navigator killed in 1942 at the tender age of 30. And in fact, I dedicate the film in his memory. And as a result, my dad was packed off to full-time boarding school at the age of 5, and it was that era of cold baths, even in the middle of winter, outside loos with no doors, corporal punishment, all those great British educational innovations. And my mum was brilliant at saying, with the kind of Australian freedom to challenging the English orthodox way, she was brilliant at saying this obviously would have affected your dad, and it's up to us as a family to unpack those effects. And I went from having a father who was not amazingly connected to now a dad who says, you're one of my ribs. And that's really thanks to my mum. So my mum is kind of like in a much milder way, obviously, but she's like a Lionel Logue figure to my father in our family.
Yeah. Colin, we're going to cut straight to the question of the stammer, because I know that question would come up from the audience even if I didn't ask it. But the thing that in reading your comments about playing the role that interested me the most was that in a strange kind of way people seem to fasten on the idea of the stammer and playing the stammer as some kind of trick. But you wanted to get a little bit beyond that, and it struck me that one of the things that happens when he's approaching the words that he can't quite get out is that he is engulfed by this silence. There's a weird way in which he seems to live in fear of those kind of being swallowed up by those silences, and you get something going actually sometimes even in your neck. There's almost like a muscular thing where he's trying to sort of pull himself back from the brink there. Can you just say a little bit about that?
It was the accompanying fear and his means of tackling it that I found most interesting about it. I mean, we can focus all we like on what happens technically to a person who's stammering, and I think that is of interest. And but I don't think it's necessarily helpful to the person who stammers, and B, necessarily helpful dramatically for our story. What we need to understand is who this man is, and we judge that according to how he negotiates his obstacles. And in this case, the stammer was obviously, it loomed very large, but it's how it informed everything else in his approach to life. I think that all the descriptions we have of George VI as a young man, as Prince Bertie, as a timid, retiring, apologetic, a lot of people would judge dim-witted young boy, which are completely wrong. I mean, if you study him with any depth and look at what he wrote and what he said, there was nothing at all wrong with the fluency of his mind. These all were things that quite clearly radiated out from the stammer. You can get into a chicken and egg argument over, where the stammer came from. But those are the things that interested me. I mean, the how the stammer sounded and what was actually happening in his mouth or his throat, that could only be the result of something. And so I think there were two very key things that struck me in terms of being helped, because first you have to help to someone has to help you stammer in order for you to then try not to stammer. And there are a lot of people who try to help people not to stammer, but there isn't an industry there to help people stammer. And
But you could start one.
if anybody wants, I can have you stammering in a month. Absolutely. I certainly had the whole crew stammering.
Yeah. No, it was contagious, actually, having said that. Once he started, it was like the whole rest. I mean,
it shut her up for a while.
Well, the thing is, it didn't shut him up. The only reason I knew that we were filming was suddenly he stopped talking. It's like, we must be on, and Colin stopped talking.
The anecdote was interrupted for 5 minutes.
He actually had to overcome a compulsive talking.
Oh, there we go.
He's non-stop.
It is. Sorry, you're interrupting me. But David Seidler did say...
He's actually not gone off.
David Seidler, the writer.
David was... he described it as being underwater. And that was very helpful. And the other thing was Tom and I watched a piece of footage of George VI in a state of complete block, giving a speech rather like the one you see in the beginning of the film here, where his jaw and his neck was clearly working, but it was something very readable, his vulnerability in that moment. And so that was all information that helped me do something which only one can do. It's just a journey of the imagination, really.
He's done stammers before. I just thought I'd add that. But you did a tumble down stammer, didn't you?
No, there was no stammer and tumble down. I did a film called Month of the Country.
Oh no, Month of the Country, sorry.
Which is, yeah, there was a First World War veteran, and there was a play called 3 Days of Rain. And so, yeah, but they tend not to be a one-size-fits-all.
He doesn't realise, stammerer.
Yeah,
Same
get my
choices.
stammer out of the drawer.
Yeah, it's like me and Queens. I did a Red Queen, and I did Green Queens. Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Same choices.
I think I'll just let you carry on, really. I mean, I hardly know why I bothered to turn up. Claire, if I can try and bring some order to this, to the proceedings. We take, in a strange kind of way, the royal family appears, at least, to be more accessible to us these days. They're kind of, there's almost like a sort of little soap opera now around the royal family. But at the time that this film is set, and this is made clear in the film, the royal family was locked away, really, basically, and until these newfangled things like the radio came along. Nobody really knew who they were. They just, as they say, you know, you just had looking good in uniform, not fall off a horse. That left you with not a lot to go on in preparing for your role, Queen Mary. But I know that Tom is an avid researcher. How did you then go about developing the role without access to that kind of material you might have now?
I didn't have a great deal of time, quite honestly. I went straight to YouTube, that great institution, and there was a very short footage of Queen Mary speaking. I was actually interested in how people spoke then, as opposed to the way the Queen, for example, spoke when she was young. Queen Mary did not speak in that very, very, very crisp little voice at all. She spoke as we do, much more open vowels and open. That's just a basic thing. The other thing is, that's mentioned in the film, the tragedy of her son, John, which I feel must have affected the epileptic prince who was hidden away because, of course, the royal family couldn't have a disadvantaged kid. So it simply made me understand that she wasn't this rigid, figure. And I had met Queen Mary, if you can call it that. I was presented to her in a box in a play that I was doing when I was 18. And I just remember this figure with certainly a wig, grey wig, and a wonderful, huge, these are a joke, huge diamond earrings. But again, it was as though she was a picture on the wall. It was not a human being I met at all. But somewhere underneath there had to have been a woman. And I think that woman had suffered a great deal. Yeah. If I were married to George V, I would have suffered a great deal. Because if he was a martinet with his sons, he must have been a nightmare with his wife. And I think those marriages at that time were, she was a princess of Teck, which I think is Germany, is it?